welcome back into Cherry Picking. Today's video, the second fantasy hockey mailbag of the season. As always, the video presented by FanDuel Canada, North America's #1 sportsbook, the best place to be betting on the NHL, college football, NFL as well. The second fantasy hockey mailbag of the season. I thought last week's went pretty well, so I thought I'd throw another one out there. We got some pretty good questions from the last fantasy hockey mailbag. Pulled some from the Must-Add. If you haven't watched that, check that out on the channel as well. Be sure to give the video a like and also subscribe to the channel. If you enjoyed the information given out today, let's get into the second fantasy hockey mailbag of the 2024-25 NHL season. All right, so I believe this was a question from the Must-Add, but Timothy Liljegren, straight on to San Jose Sharks top power play, worth a look, question mark. So Timothy Liljegren got traded from the Toronto Maple Leafs for Matt Benning. Benning went over to Toronto, Liljegren over to San Jose, and got immediately put on that first power play. His first couple games, he's looked solid. First two games are, the first game, he looked pretty solid, and then they played Columbus and got absolutely dominated. Even though they won, they got dominated. So his numbers there weren't great, but they weren't the worst on the team, which is also very important. But in his first game with the Sharks, he had the second highest on-ice expected goals for. So when he was on the ice, he was creating a decent amount of offense as well. He also led the game for the Sharks in expected goals for percentage. So he was definitely doing a lot more on the ice. Or contributing a lot more on the when he was on the ice compared to obviously when he was off. The Sharks were struggling when he was off the ice there. He played 17 minutes in that first game. He is 2% rostered. I thought the main guy you'd want to add on this San Jose blue line would be Jake Wallman, but he was a healthy scratch last night. Coach's decision. I haven't heard really much else other than that. Wallman's 38% rostered. He was a healthy scratch against the Blue Jackets. Does it seem like that'll be considering how much they got dominated against the Blue Jackets, I don't know if that'll be a consistent thing because he was their best defenseman offensively and maybe not defensively because they have Mario Ferraro who blocks a bunch of shots and shit. But he's definitely a key piece or a guy I would think would help them win games. So I know he had a tough outing his last game before the Blue Jackets game. Maybe that's the main reason. However, if you're in a really big pinch, if you're in a really deep league and you need someone who's getting first power play time, is playing about 17 to 18 minutes, which is what Liljegren is doing, I would add him. But if not, Wallman is the guy you're going to want to add. And even in deep leagues, I think it could be a wait and see with Timothy Liljegren unless you have massive rosters. All right, so the next question we have here, do you think I should trade Verhaeghe for Elias Pettersson? Thanks in advance. No problem. Hopefully I can give you the right advice here. It's a tough situation, I would say, because obviously Verhaeghe's having a career start to the year or a very good start to the year. 14 points through his start. Remained pointless in that last loss against the St. Louis Blues, but I think that was just a down game overall for the Lightning. 14 points this year. He's been scoring at a very high rate. I'd say him and Kucherov lead the team in goals for the Tampa Bay Lightning right now. Hagel right now, the one thing, I've mentioned shooting talent percentage on Money Puck is a stat I kind of look at to see if a player's recent production is true, if it's going to continue to carry. And the one thing, Hagel's a pretty talented shooter, obviously a really talented hockey player. Right now is 3.2 goals above shooting talent. So he's achieving above what he is really putting out onto the ice right now. And now that's looked at it from a purely analytical base. He's a high motor type of player. He's definitely going to score skilled goals, but he's also going to score those goals that are in front of the net as well. But you look at a guy like Elias Pettersson, his shooting talent, much better than Hagel. It's 30%. One of the highest I would say in the NHL, just for fucking reason. The guy doesn't shoot the puck a whole lot. But he is negative 1.5 goals above shooting talent at the moment. Hagel's creating more offense too, which is somewhat surprising, I guess, playing on that second line. Obviously not getting that first line with Point, Kucherov, and Gensel. He just got elevated to the first power play too, so that has a factor in it. And then you look at both their on-ice shooting percentages. I think it's just also a fluctuation of how these two teams have performed to start the year. Pettersson's on-ice shooting percentage is 10%, Hagel's is 17%. The Lightning have been scoring a lot, and Vancouver has not, to be totally honest. I think they're still trying to figure out this lineup. I don't know if they ever will. I thought their additions were good in the offseason, but it doesn't seem like Nashville is. They haven't found it early on in this season so far. I'd say Elias Pettersson is put into more offensive positions. He just needs to execute at this point. And the one stat you can kind of look at, he has one of the highest offensive zone start percentages, definitely on the Canucks at about 56%. It's pretty high. Hagel's is a little bit lower in the 40 in the 40%. Like, Pettersson is a purely offensive player for this Vancouver Canucks team. Like, I don't think he's really going to be a Selke candidate, but he'll definitely be a guy who's going to continue, to lead or drive the offense for the Vancouver Canucks. Helge can do it all. Like, I feel like he can even, be a penalty killer at some point. We'll play in all different situations wherever, John Cooper needs him. So what do we do? Do you trade Helge for Pettersson? I wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't give Pettersson for Helge at this point. I wouldn't trade for Helge, and I don't think I would give up the vice versa as well, because I think Pettersson will bounce back. Last year, he had one of the highest on-ice shooting percentages for the duration of the season. I think he was due for a little bit of regression to start the year, but I think he'll come back to where we know Elias Pettersson, in that 30 to 40 goal range, 80 points, 70 points. I think is somewhere where he could live 100% for this season, at least, at the bare minimum. I know it's a slow start, but I think he could definitely still get there. So definitely wouldn't be giving Pettersson for Helge, but I would try to trade Helge for Pettersson if my roster kind of fit for me. All right, so the next question we got here: trade Elias Pettersson for Steven Stamkos. Is that something that this has honestly been a pretty hot topic within fantasy hockey, just because both of these guys have been very poor to start the season. Nashville as a whole has been very underwhelming. Barry Trotz had a lot of quotes yesterday that we will get into kind of as this video gets on, but it's really close because you could argue that Stamkos' ceiling is higher, because we don't really know what it is on Nashville. But you could also say the same thing about his floor. And I think his floor right now, where we're at, his floor, I would say with he has 3 or 4 points the first 11, 10 games of the season, has not been able to really score. He's been shooting way less than we're used to him seeing shooting on Tampa Bay. I think they definitely need a competent center between Marchessault and Stamkos. Like, for whatever I think the Tommy Novak experience was very short-lived. I think they need to give that a little bit more of a runtime, because what else do you do? Colton Sissons isn't going to be the guy, I don't think. They tried Husso Parson, and I don't know if that's necessarily going to work either. I think Novak's probably the best option there. But the one thing I think that you can rely on, because Stamkos at this point on Nashville, he's purely being set up and he's supposed to be shooting, but he's just not. I think Pettersson drives more offense on the Vancouver Canucks personally, like as from an individual aspect. I know the individual expected goals for numbers at this moment don't really show that, but I think that will end up changing. Obviously, Stamkos put in a lot of good positions to score, considering he's going to be the guy with one of the better shots on the team. But I think Pettersson can do a little bit more in all factors of the ice to contribute to your fantasy hockey team, other than just looking purely at goals, which is what you're going to get from Stamkos. And you're supposed to be relying on his shot volume, but just hasn't been good. So yesterday, Barry Trotz did this radio hit in Nashville and was asked a bunch of questions. So the first thing he was asked about the talent on the team that they've picked up. And he said, we have 340 goal scorers from last season, and they're all passing the puck. So Stamkos is definitely being called out in that sentence right there, 100%. And then when he's asked about the season, he said, not giving up the season yet. We have to give these guys a chance to do something on the road in the next couple of weeks. So obviously these next couple of weeks are huge, because what Barry Trotz said after, when he asked about if his team build doesn't work, if we don't get it going, I'll start the rebuild plan a little bit. So if they don't have like a 500 record, if they're not in a playoff position in like a month, I would say he's probably going to start the rebuild process for this Nashville Predators team, which is quite daunting. Especially if you have someone like Steven Stamkos. I know that he just signed this 4-year deal with him. I'm not 100% sure what his no trade clause is at this point, but it doesn't seem like he's probably going to be moving him very much at that point. But still, that's got to be a little bit concerning here, those quotes from Barry Trotz. Hopefully, maybe it's like a motivational factor for some of these players if they see those quotes. But what does it mean overall? I think I'd rather have Pettersson. I think he'd be a little bit more consistent. As I mentioned, in all facets of fantasy hockey. Stamkos, you're definitely relying on goals at this point, especially considering he's not really shooting. So I think I'd rather have Pettersson. I think I'd much rather have Pettersson. Or the next question we have here, Seattle Kraken defenseman Rker Evans, huge pickup in deep leagues. This was added in our must-add video. He's been playing first pair with Adam Larson, I want to say over the past 5-6 games. Now, Seattle's been getting absolutely crushed recently, so his on-ice numbers are definitely not reassuring. But what he's doing individually, I think, is worth a case of having him or picking him up right now, especially considering Vince Dunn is on LTIR. That makes this guy especially fantasy viable. He's 7th in points on the team right now with 8. Second amongst defensemen, really only behind Montour. His 3 goals and 5 assists, so contributing all factors. Played in the WHL, had a ton of points in the WHL actually, and had some pretty decent seasons in the AHL with Coachella over the past 2 years as well. 15% rostered. His last 3 games, he's played 25, 22, and 25 minutes. So really, if you have a defenseman on your waiver wire that's playing 21 plus minutes and almost a point per game, like a point every other game, which is what pretty much he's doing, I think he's definitely a guy worth looking at, especially 15% owned. So Rker Evans, definitely a guy I'd be looking to pick up at this point. All right, the next question we have here, would you trade Lucas Raymond and Connor Zary for Carter Verhaeghe? If you're getting Carter Verhaeghe, I definitely would, 100%. Look, Lucas Raymond has been very inconsistent scoring the puck over the course of his NHL career. You can always count on him for assists, but when it comes down, I know I was just talking about goals and assists with Pettersson and Stamkos. When it comes down to where it's going to be such a difference between Raymond's goals and Carter Verhaeghe, I think Carter Verhaeghe is definitely the better option. Connor Zary is definitely more of a goal scorer, but Verhaeghe plays on a team that scores more than almost both of these two teams, Detroit and Calgary combined, I want to say. He has a better supporting cast with Sam Bennett and Matt Tkachuk. You can argue Raymond has a good supporting cast, obviously, with DeBrincat and Raymond, but every other guy on that roster obviously isn't as talented as what Florida has to offer offensively, their offensive depth, really. 31 goals for Raymond last year. I think that's his peak. Meanwhile, Verhaeghe can easily scratch like the 40 goal and 80 point mark playing on this Florida Panthers team, barring like a fully healthy Florida Panthers lineup, or even when, guys are out, it adds even more opportunity for him. So he's an offensive weapon for Florida, obviously. Not that the other guys aren't, but they aren't starting 65% of their shifts in the offensive zone. Carter Verhaeghe is. So I think that's just a stamp of approval for this question right here. Would you trade Lucas Raymond and Connor Zary for Carter Verhaeghe? No. I would trade both of those guys if I was getting Carter Verhaeghe, but I wouldn't trade Carter Verhaeghe to get Lucas Raymond or Connor Zary. All right, the last question we have here, what about Wyatt Johnson? So he's definitely been a little bit more quiet, I would say, but you just have to be patient with him. I think there's definitely some bad puck luck going on for this guy at the moment. Duchesne, for a perfect example, like he has 15 points on this Stars team, has an individual expected goals for about 4. Johnson's like right below him in terms of the amount of offense he's created, and he has 6 points. He's just not getting the right touches, and he's just not finishing when he gets put in the opportunity to score at this point. However, the line that he's been playing on has performed rather poor. I don't know why Peter DeBoer has changed up these lines. Like, he was the Stars line we knew for 2 years ago. The Rupe Hintz, Jason Robertson, Pavelski line was like one of the best lines in hockey. Obviously, Pavelski retired just this past season, but near the end of last year, they started to switch and put Johnson on that line, which added just another offensive weapon there for the Dallas Stars, and filling that Pavelski role, but probably in an even better standpoint. But now you have Jamie Benn playing with Wyatt Johnson and Evgeny Dadonov, and they have been the worst offensive line for the Stars out of the 3 that they've been carrying over for the past 2 weeks. So I don't really get why DeBoer continues to force this line combination. I think the Robertson, Hintz, Johnson line, and then the rest of the forwards kind of spread out from there is definitely the best way. And the best way they've created offense, if you look at the last 2 years, too. They haven't really been scoring at a super high rate, I would say, recently. Obviously, they just had that series in Finland where Florida was pretty dominant. So I think it's definitely a buy low spot, kind of, for Wyatt Johnson, considering everyone was so high on him. Maybe people are fed up with him. Maybe fantasy owners who drafted him in the second round or whatever it may be are kind of done with him at this point. I think it'd be a hard sell to try to trade Wyatt Johnson or take Wyatt Johnson from smart fantasy hockey players. But I think if you're an owner of him, don't worry. The points will come. Dallas will start to score again. They're just going through a little bit of lull. And when they were scoring at the beginning of the season, fortunately for fantasy owners of Johnson, he just wasn't the biggest beneficiary of it. So hold on to Wyatt Johnson. He will definitely bounce back here. All right, thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know what you thought of the second fantasy hockey mailbag of the season. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And shout out to FanDuel Canada for sponsoring the video.